Good morning, and thank you for joining me for today's sharing. Again, a little bit earlier in the day today. I want to pick up on my sharing last week. Last week, I talked about my personal experience of dealing with quite a bit of lower back pain, which was severe enough to stop me from doing certain things, from giving treatments for starters. And it had so much resonance and feedback. And thank you to everyone who wrote to me and who shared their experience and asked questions. So I thought I'd talk a little bit more about it. Something that I observed in the kind of comments that I got was how frustrated people are getting with their pain. There's so much frustration, and I hear you. It's like, okay, so why are you here, dear pain? Like, what are you trying to tell me? Come on, just tell me, and I'll do it. Or well, it's frustrating also not being able to do certain things. I was really frustrated not being able to work and to move and to be kind of like my strong self. It's super frustrating. So there's quite a lot of that. There is an impatience also something that totally resonates with me. Like, why is it not getting any better? I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I'm resting, I'm doing this exercise, I'm doing everything that they tell me to do. And nothing kind of shifts and nothing changes. Or you have a really good day, but then the next day it's like, bam, and there it is again. But also, I noticed quite a bit of relief in what people were saying to me. In that, this kind of relief that somebody kind of would feel the same. There are other people out there who might actually normally seem like really strong and everything and healthy, but there are other people who actually also feel pain and feel the same, and also feel that frustration, and also feel the impatience and all of that kind of emotional turmoil that comes with having some kind of pain in the body. And this kind of, I'm not alone in this. And you're really not. So let's talk about it more. That's something that I took from that. So if people feel like, oh, thank goodness, finally somebody also says something about feeling pain and I'm not just making this up, then that means that we are not talking about it enough. And I think we're not talking about it enough because very often with this kind of pain that we have, when it doesn't have a real, true, specific cause, like, okay, you broke your back, or you pulled a muscle, or you sprained your ankle, or you have an infection, or an inflammation, or a cut, or you burnt yourself, or something like this. But if none of that is actually the case, but you're still feeling this pain and you don't seem to be able to shift it, people start to sort of think you're a bit crazy, because they look at you thinking, well, but what's wrong with you? And so maybe we stop talking about it, but also maybe because we are afraid of showing our vulnerable side too much, maybe because we don't want to get on anyone's nerves, or we don't want to be a burden, or we don't want to sound like a broken record, or I don't know. But I feel like it is important to keep talking about it and to explain what it is, like how it feels, because something that we need to really bear in mind is that pain cannot be put on a universal kind of scaling kind of measure, because pain is always exactly what and how strong a person says it is, because it's what they feel. And it might be that it's to do with an error function in their pain reception part of their brain, but that doesn't mean it doesn't feel real. The pain is there. The brain is sending that signal of pain. And so yeah, kind of talking about it, I think makes a lot of sense, to maybe even realize that, of course, there are others who actually have the same experience or a similar experience, and they can, just to have somebody to hear you and say, yes, I feel the same. Because actually we heal in community, we are beings of relation. But yeah, also to have that sense of being heard. And so I often so there's another aspect to it, though. And you can do that actually talking with somebody, but you can also have this conversation with yourself, because, so in my case, it's not kind of turned into chronic pain. It was quite acute, and I'm shifting it, so that's really good. So far. But quite often this kind of pain that also just comes from no real injury. I didn't lift something or pulled something or fell or anything. I didn't have an injury. It was just there. So very, very often there is kind of an emotional story that is underlying here. An underlying emotional story, or a story of anxiety, or a story of overwhelm, or some kind of story. And the body has decided it's time to look at that and to stop. And so here is the funny thing, that actually I think most of us kind of know this. I hear so many people saying, yeah, I kind of, when my body tells me this, I really listen to the body, and I stop, and da da da. But I don't think that we actually really take the time to really, really listen to, well, what actually is it that the body is trying to tell us? And I go on and on about these stories, and how we embed these stories of our life, and they turn into all sorts of behavioral patterns, but also into pain in the body. And so this was a really good reminder to do this inquiry myself, and to understand again about these stories that I talk about all the time. And so I wanted to share a little bit my kind of practice, my inquiry practice, that I did also with this pain. And you can do it. I would really recommend to actually literally make time, and to make time for as long and as often as it takes. But you can also, sort of, once you sort of tune into it, you can even do it on an ongoing basis, and then at some point the body is ready to tell you. But if you do it as an actual practice, the first thing that I would suggest is to do something that is grounding for you. So whatever that might be. And it could be that it's going out and do something in the garden, or in nature, or that you put your feet on the floor, or that you sit in meditation and you do a yoga or meditation grounding practice, tuning into feeling your connection to the ground, feeling gravity, feeling your weightedness, feeling how you're connecting and touching with what you're sitting on or leaning back against. Whatever it is, everybody has a way of grounding themselves, and you know best what works for you. And there's many guided practices out there as well, of course. So just sitting still for me, for example, works quite nicely. But also, going outside, and maybe going to a place where I know I feel good. That there can be a place that grounds you, for example, and to take your time with that, so that you really have that sense that you are steady and stable and supported by the ground. So whatever story may come up, it may not be always that comfortable to look at it, but you know that you feel safe and steady enough to not get overwhelmed by it. So that's really important. So this grounding is about making sure that we really feel safe in exactly where we are at that moment of the inquiry. We're creating that safe space for us. And it could be, that's like your own living room. As part of grounding, you could also do some orienting. So if you already know, like just the thought of maybe looking at some of the story is giving you like making you feel nervous and bringing a little bit of anxiety up in your system, orient yourself. And orienting yourself, again, is about feeling exactly where you're sitting, your weight, your body, the pressure of your weight on your sit bones or your back, depending on how you're sitting. And looking around the room, for example, to let your body know exactly, okay, so I am in my living room and there's my bookshelf and it's this far away and there's another shelf, there's this picture, there's the window. I'm sitting on the sofa with these 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 cushions and this blanket, and you're taking everything in. You're taking everything in. And it seems really silly to do in a room that is your living room, but it's actually about giving your nervous system that actual message of knowing exactly where you are at that moment in time, and you know that your body knows and your nervous system knows that you are exactly where you are right now, right here, and that you're safe. So first thing, grounding, orienting. And then I find really helpful to connect with the body and do a body scan. So that's kind of part of the same thing. So that's not only orienting ourselves externally, but also coming in. And we want to do an inquiry into the pain that we feel in the body physically. So let's have a scan. And as part of that scan, we notice all of the parts of the body that actually feel absolutely fine right now. And maybe the part of the body that has the pain also feels absolutely fine right now, because maybe you're sitting comfortably enough and there is nothing actually painful. So feel the body, do a scan, go from the toes all the way through the body. That has also a really calming effect on the nervous system. So again, we're kind of stabilizing and steadying ourselves. Do a body scan. Something that I quite enjoy doing, or I like doing as part of this, and it's something that I would do regularly after every treatment I give, for example, or as kind of part of my ritual of maintenance, is to take a moment and ask any energy that doesn't really belong to me, any stuff that I carry around that I know for a fact is not mine, and I ask it to leave. And it might be necessary to really have the window open or to do that even beforehand when you're outside somewhere, and you ask it to leave. So if you're not sure, if you can't put your finger on it as to what that is, you could also ask about 20% of your energy and everything you carry around to just go. And that's how energy behaves on intention. And about 20% of stuff that we carry around just isn't ours. It's what we've picked up over, whatever the past few days or lifetime. And that also obviously means that you left some of your energy behind in other places, and you could maybe even ask for that back. So you're doing a little reset energetically. Give away what doesn't really belong to you. Any stories, anything that is bothering you. Can be literally like you're going on in your head from a phone call that you had with somebody yesterday, or I don't know, whatever it is. None of that kind of really matters right now. You let it go. And maybe they still have some of your energy from that phone call, and you just ask for it back. Do a little reset. And then, so that's your kind of preparation. Grounding, body scan, and a little energy reset. And then we start the inquiry. And what is actually really helpful to begin with is to focus on that area that is giving you the pain, and to see what right now, what color it might have, what shape it might have, how big it is, its dimensions, if it has a sound or movement, if it's rotating, spinning, shaking, moving, going up and down. Is it symmetrical? Is it asymmetrical? Is it 3-dimensional, 2-dimensional? Is it bright? Is it dull? To really visualize it or notice all of its qualities and take your time over that. So ask, what color is it? Can you see it? Can you physically picture it? What shape does it have? And maybe even say it out loud or write it down, or, so you're really bringing it into your consciousness. And it might seem a bit strange because you might say, oh, but I know exactly it's that one muscle that's bothering me and it's got a spasm or something. Yeah, but the feeling, the experience of the pain itself, what is that like? See if you can picture it. And the reason I'm asking you to do that is because it's quite interesting to see if that changes at all by the time you've gone through some inquiry, because it might be changing. And that's helpful to bring into consciousness. And in order to do that, we just give it a color, we give it a real shape, we picture it. It's just a tool. Try it, see if you like it. And then we ask, and I like to ask, first of all, because it's so easy to go into the drama, to ask, how, dear pain, are you today? And it might be that today is much worse than yesterday, but it might be that right now, and because you're sitting comfortably, or you might be even lying down, or whatever it is you're doing, that it's okay. Because it doesn't actually hurt all the time. In our mind, it hurts all the time because it's got really bad. But right now, it might not actually hurt that bad. So, how are you right now? How are you doing? And then we can ask, what do you need? What do you need right now? And it could be physically changing position, or stretching or moving. It could be to stop the inquiry and to remove yourself from this inquiry, and that is okay. So always know that, the door is also always open, to leave, to take yourself out of the situation. You're not going to get trapped in this inquiry. You're not going to be trapped in the pain. You're not going to be trapped in the story. You can always choose to take yourself out of that situation. Because nobody's forcing you to do this inquiry. Really important. You have that choice. You always have that choice. But what do you need? What do you need right now? And you might be surprised by a very simple answer that the pain might give you here. We might say, right now, actually, I don't really need anything. I'm just here. And so then we can go into the question, so what is it that I need to know? What are you here to tell me? And then you listen, and it might not be any particularly meaningful answer that comes. It might be, you just need to stop lifting things from the floor in such a stupid way. You silly you. Stop doing that and hurting me. Something like this. And you go, okay. But then you go, and what else? And the what else could be, and I shared this one before, it could also be a acknowledging and saying, like an when you're in an actual conversation with somebody and you often go like, or they go, It's this kind of like notion of, okay, that information has landed, and it has landed in exactly the way it needed to land with me or you. And then you wait. And there'll be something else that comes up. So we every thought, every answer that comes, because quite likely there'll be some other thoughts getting in the way, and not just kind of like getting clear answers that you were hoping for. Very frustrating process again, and we get impatient and our ego gets in the way. So whatever other thought comes up, we just go, okay. Because maybe it's kind of part of the process of getting to some more of the story. So it could be something like, a thought going, why am I having to do all of this again? I'm so bored of this. Okay. Well, I'm hurting because you need to stop. You need to take a break. you've been doing too much. And you go, And then there's another thought going, yeah, but, because you start having this kind of slight internal argument with yourself. Yeah, but, I wasn't really, and I was taking enough breaks, and I was like, Okay. And that's it. And you keep going. And so you're becoming your own kind of true listener. And in a way, you're your own true listener and not, because your ego would always get in the way and going, but I didn't do, and I didn't that, and but I did everything, and But you just truthfully listen to that as well. And you go, just as respectfully and openly and quietly as you listen to maybe some more insight that comes from the actual pain. And it might be that eventually something surfaces and something goes, well, maybe, and maybe it's with a maybe. Maybe so with my pain, I realized that maybe I needed to allow myself to show a vulnerable side and to allow myself to receive some support and help, and that it was okay to not only ever be this strong warrioress, but to also have a weak side, and to allow myself to be in that place of just having, I'm also just a human body with it, or I'm being with a human body, and it's okay that I can't keep fighting and pushing all the time and be the strong warrior for everybody else around me. That maybe I also need somebody else to hear me, to feel me, to see me, to be there for me, to allow myself to be vulnerable. It's a possibility. I'm not entirely there yet at the bottom of it all. And I will keep inquiring, but that's something that is beginning to show up a little bit. But then the thing is that as I'm sitting with maybe some of that information, there's a whole bunch of things that we can take from that. So first of all, once you've gone through your inquiry, take a look at the color and the shape and the sound and the pain. What did it look like before, and has it shifted in some way? Sometimes it might literally dissolve in what, not the pain per se, but how you were seeing it. It might have changed color or shape. It might have changed size. It might have changed sound. And maybe not, and that is okay. So that's something to bring into consciousness, step number one. But then to say, okay, so this is the story, and this is where we might need to do the work. Because, when we know what is the story, we know that around that story we've built certain behavioral patterns, physical patterns, habitual patterns, and they are likely to protect ourselves, or to find a way to somehow navigate life and the whirlwinds of life, and to navigate specifically maybe the parts of our lives that are overwhelming and too much, or too little, or too something. These stories have created some coping mechanisms, and somehow that was triggered, and maybe you realize what was the trigger, and don't hate it, it's all good. It's all good. That trigger came about probably for a reason. It was time. So let's not hate the trigger, let's be grateful for it. Because if we get to that point, we've gone very, very far already. If we manage to get to that point in our inquiry, wow, that's amazing, So be really grateful, noticing what might have triggered you, because then you can make peace with it. Because very likely your ego was already going, yeah, why, what, this person, or da, 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 da. Okay, you know, that actually it wasn't them or about them or anything at all. It was just that some buttons were pushed, and it was your process, and that's all good. And so we can also forgive and be all good with whoever triggered us. Maybe we realized it was actually building up over time. It was like, building up and building up and building up and building up and building up, and we didn't even realize. But then it was just something that sent us over the edge, and poof, we needed to experience something stronger so that we would finally do something about it. But really, part of the process of releasing this type of pain. No, this is not for every pain, of course, but for this type of pain, is to look at that story and to start changing the narrative of the story that is the story of the problem, to a story of health. So first we realize that, okay, so these are patterns, these are coping mechanisms and responses that the body is bringing us for survival ultimately, and to keep feeling safe and to navigate this overwhelm. But it's also based on a past experience or some kind of story that actually right now is no longer serving us. Because remember where you are right now in your safe environment. It is a story, but it is actually not me. But to accept and allow that story, that's also part of what's going on in my life. It's part of my life story. To allow it, to bring some acceptance to it, to accept that, yes, I am also vulnerable, and yes, I have also some weaknesses, and yes, I don't need to be only this kind of strong warrior. And inviting that quality in just as much as that quality of strength. And then you can get all philosophical about it and say, well, maybe you'll be an even stronger warrior if you also show your weaknesses or something like that. I don't know yet. I need to figure that out. And these are all very big words. I mean, what does that actually really mean? Acceptance and trusting and they're kind of so overused. They almost lost their authenticity and their meaning. So figure out what that means really for you. What does that really feel like when we go into acceptance and trusting? To me, it's kind of like acknowledging that that's all part of life, and it's part of the story that I live here on this planet in this lifetime. And it's all good. It's okay. It's all part of the bigger story. But it's not me, it doesn't define me. I already in my last talk mentioned about this kind of crazy knee pain that I had when it was in the process, and then also when I arrived here in Lisbon. And it was absolutely nothing that caused it at all. There was no injuries or anything at all, but I could hardly get off a chair. It was hilarious. Like I was moving around like an old woman, and I was not even as old as I am now. I was in my 30s. And it took somebody else to point out to me, like, what, okay, but you just changed your life upside down. What was that like? And I said, well, really exciting, and it's all so much fun, and da 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 da. Okay, and what else? I'm like, what do you mean, what else? Well, yeah, I guess it was kind of also a bit like somebody sort of pulled the floor out from underneath my feet, and I'm dangling in midair, free falling, and it's also a bit scary. And it didn't take very long to get to that. It was just somebody else asking me that question, and I go, oh, okay. And from that moment of accepting and allowing the fact that it was also super scary what I was doing, literally turning my life upside down, starting again in a new city. And I'm really not kidding, but the pain just went. The next day, it was gone. It took just that. And that was kind of maybe a lucky story. But I will never forget that. And I know with my back pain, there's a little bit more of an inquiry needed, and sometimes we need somebody else to help us along with it, to really look at that, and because somebody else can actually see it sometimes more clearly. We're kind of almost too close to it, and it's not easy to hear very often. But that is what these big words mean to me, to listen and to say, oh, okay, yeah, maybe, and maybe that's okay. And so, yeah, I don't, there seems like a sort of inquiry where you think, but really, what's that really got to do with anything? What's that really got to do with my pain? That all seems a little bit out there, a bit airy-fairy. And I hear you. I'm just sharing it from my own experience, and it might not always help, and that's okay too. And I'm also only saying it's part of the work. We also need to deal with the physical manifestation of it that is already taking place. I'm not saying don't do the yoga practice or whatever it is that you will do. I'm not saying that it can be as fast as my story with my legs. It might be a year-long story and process. I know also I have another experience of it having taken a very, very long time. I had for 2 or 3 years extremely itchy skin for no real particular reason either, and I did all of the internal detoxing and cleansing and sorting out my diet and everything else. But I also knew there was something very emotional at the bottom of it, and it took a long time, not like a day, but 3 years. So yeah, I hear you, and I'm just sharing it as a possibility, as an option, as part of the work that we need to do to deal with this pain that is bothering us. Yeah, and I also started off by saying that I mean absolutely no kind of disrespect to anyone's serious stories, and also serious conditions that they might be suffering from, that is causing the pain. And I do strongly believe, though, that part of the process is to look at our stories in the way that we somehow have interfered with our ability to discern sensation and sensory input, movement, and our breath, and develop these patterns in our system. So yeah, that was my kind of little follow-up sharing here. I hope that was resonating. Thank you, Manuela, for your comment. How amazing. You received an instant answer. Yeah, and whatever information comes, and we might not always come to a full conclusion in our inquiry, and it's okay for there to be an open ending, and to not be quite sure what might be coming next. That's also fine. It's all good. This is the thing with information, like when we do these inquiries or we receive information, or even receive information from others, is to not go into judgment or making further assumptions or second guessing, because that is just not helpful at all. Information is just that. It's neutral. It's information. So yeah, to just allow that. And sometimes even our own information, we don't need to go into having to understand that fully or make sense of it. It's all good. Sometimes it can just be there, and to allow it to just be there can already sometimes make a big difference. So thank you, Manuel, for your lovely comments. And yes, let's meet again soon in person. I am all for that. Thank you also for anyone watching this later on replay. Do please leave your comments, your observations, your questions, your own experiences if you're willing to share in the comments. I always love to hear from you all, and have a wonderful start to this wonderful new week. Take care, everyone. Bye for now.